So the general consensus amongst value investors and a lot of YouTubers as well, ones with larger channels, is that Intel stock is a buy here at today's prices. Not only is it a buy, it is severely undervalued and it's a no-brainer investment. That's at least the thesis that we hear. Now, my investing style is fairly conservative. I love investing in large blue chip companies. I love investing in industry leaders, and I love investing in businesses that have proven themselves and that will just keep generating cash over the long term while growing their top and bottom lines. So when I see names, blue chip names that are discounted, trading undervalued, or just out of favor with the market right now for whatever reason, and I think that the company is a great business, I will not hesitate to start buying and adding shares and dollar cost averaging over time. I've done that with many companies in the past. It's paid off tremendously for me, and I will continue doing that into the future. But to me, when I look at Intel stock, it's a hard pass for me, and I'm going to explain why in this video. So guys, if you appreciate my thoughts in this video and you appreciate this kind of contrarian view to the contrarians who are already kind of, contrarian on Intel stock, hit the like button. That's the best way you can support this channel. So Intel stock is in the spotlight again because they reported earnings recently and they saw a sharp, almost 15% decline since that a few days ago. Couple this with the fact that the stock is down nearly 30% from earlier this year, it definitely piques the interest to a lot of investors, especially value investors. And I will be completely honest, I've wrestled back and forth with myself on whether I want to own Intel or not own Intel. I've made videos on Intel in the past and I was fairly optimistic at the time, but it's just getting clear to me now that this is not a company that I want anything to do with at this time. During the biggest boom in technology and semiconductors over the last few decades, Intel, who was a leader, hasn't even been able to surpass its 2000 dot-com bubble prices. And yes, while stock prices don't reflect necessarily the business in the short term, it definitely does reflect the business over the long term, especially over many decades. Many investors have been holding the stock for many years while they watch the market and other blue chip tech names surpass it. So here's a story with Intel. They're a blue chip semiconductor player and they used to be best in class for their CPUs. Everyone wanted an Intel Core i5, i7, whatever, Intel inside. Everyone wanted that. But in recent years, we've seen companies surpass them. We've seen competitors really eat their lunch. And an Intel chip now is kind of seen as a negative with some products. For gaming performance, as you can see, benchmarked here by Tom's Hardware, they are losing to AMD. For productivity and content creation performance, you can see again, they're losing to AMD. To efficiency with power consumption, where lower on the graph is better, they are losing to AMD. AMD has quite simply come out of a company that was irrelevant, this tiny little player that no one really cares about. Their chips were seen as kind of like these things that aren't reliable, they'll just die on you, to literally becoming the #1 player now when it comes to performance for mass market chips. And this was all while Intel was just sitting there doing the same thing they always do, generating a ton of cash, billions of dollars in cash, but just failing to keep up and innovate. They had a lead and they lost that lead. And of course, Apple has come out of nowhere recently, dropping Intel from its products because they are able to produce better chips than Intel has with their new M1 chips. It's pretty funny because if you look online, you look at, laptops, old MacBooks that have the Intel chips, the i5, i7, whatever, people are like, no, skip the Intel, don't get Intel, get the M1. It's already known by just general consumers that the M1 chip is much better than the Intel chip. And that's definitely not going to help the brand here over the long term because this is exactly what AMD faced in the past and it did affect the company because a lot of people saw AMD and they were like, nah, and even it may perform like just as well, maybe cheaper, but I'm not interested. I prefer Intel. It's funny now the script has kind of changed and people see Intel and they're like, nah, I'd rather not. The semiconductor space, guys, is fierce. There's so many companies in so many different sectors. It's actually a pretty complicated industry to look into and kind of invest in. And the bottom line is that Intel had an advantage, but they lost it to competition. Now here's the thing. The good news, Intel has recognized that they've dropped the ball here. And in recent months, they've started to make changes to the business fundamentally that they hope will turn things around and make them a relevant #1 player once again. For one, they brought in a new CEO who many believe has a good shot of turning the company around and bringing it back to a leader in the space. The second thing that they wanted to do was they tried to acquire Global Foundries, which ironically was spun off from AMD, but it doesn't look like this is going to happen because Global Foundries actually just went public. So you can see the company is trying to change and, do things differently than they have over the last few decades. But really, what is the bottom line with this company and this stock? Knowing that the company has dropped the ball, knowing that they're losing customers like Apple, and you have competitors like AMD, even Nvidia kind of surpassing this company, and knowing that they are just not the leader in the space anymore, why are investors still considering buying this stock? The answer is because on paper, this looks like a great business to own and that will generate a ton of cash flow for you over the long term. For comparison's sake, let's look at AMD first. They're trading at a 45 forward PE, which will come down a bit to about a 36 next year, which compared to the market guys in general is quite expensive. Their free cash flow is only now just starting to turn positive after many, many years of losses. AMD is not the best company here on paper. If you look at these things, they're just like, why would I ever want to own a company that's just now starting to become profitable when I can own a company that's been profitable for so long? By comparison, you can see Intel here on paper is trading at a 12 forward PE, which drops down to an 11 by December 2022, and free cash flow is consistently strong, well over $10 billion per year, which could be used for reinvestments. Looks pretty good, right? Those metrics are amazing, and a company that has that should see their stock price go higher. Well, I kind of tricked you guys there. I kind of pulled a fast one on you because the numbers that you just saw for Intel is actually IBM's numbers. I just wanted to get the point across that metrics sometimes can be misleading. You look at things like just the PEs, you look at things like their free cash flow, it looks great on paper, but this is the reality of the situation. This is how IBM has done over the last few years. It's been a dog, really. Probably going to get kicked out of the Dow very soon. And this is an important lesson to not just look at fundamentals, but to look at the broader story as well. No, but in all seriousness, guys, Intel is a better business than IBM. I will not deny that. But it is a very similar story. Intel is at a 4 PE of around a 10.66. It's expected to rise a bit next year to around a 14, but it's still very cheap versus the broader market, and especially compared to its most closest competitor, AMD. Free cash flow for Intel hasn't been a problem either. It's strong and it hit over $20 billion last year. But despite these strong metrics and fundamentals, the market keeps pricing Intel like a boomer stock. And very similar to companies like IBM, while the fundamentals may be strong, their best days might be behind them. Now granted, Intel is growing their top line, which has been flattening in recent years, and this is where you can see that competition has really come in and taken a piece of their pie. And Intel also does pay a dividend, which is another value add for investors. So guys, it's not just the market is mispricing this and this is some dirt cheap stock. The reality is that they are losing customers. The reality is that they are falling behind competition, and it's pretty evident now. And the reality is that it is affecting their financials here, as you can see by that revenue growth. And this right here is really the core as to why I'm not investing in Intel right now. For some clarity, I have held IBM in the past. I bought into the story that it's a turnaround company. They got a new CEO, things were looking good, fundamentals were strong, they paid a dividend, all these things just checked the boxes for a great long-term investment. Held the company for a little while, didn't see any changes to the actual fundamental business, even with all of this excitement, and I decided to close out. Didn't really want any part of that anymore. With Intel, I'm getting very similar vibes as I did with IBM. I know I keep comparing the two companies, and I believe in my mind that they're both going in the same direction here. And only time will tell if, this new CEO can be the saving grace to really turn things around and make this a company that's a leader once again. Also, for transparency, I do hold Nvidia and I do hold Apple. I do not hold AMD at this time. However, it is a company that I'm definitely interested in looking at, but at the right price. At today's prices, not really too excited. And I think by holding Nvidia and Apple, I'm getting pretty good semiconductor exposure, especially through Nvidia. It's been one of my best performing stocks. And just so you guys know, I'm also looking at another massive behemoth in the semiconductor space, considering adding that to my portfolio at some point. If you guys want a video on that, you want to know what stock that is, let me know in the comments down below. I really just, I just feel that if you are a leader in a segment, you've been a leader for many, many years, you're a company that's built its brand extremely strong, consumers love it, people respect it, and you're generating a ton of free cash flow every year on top of that, there should be no reason for a company that's irrelevant, really, AMD, to be able to turn things around, go from near bankruptcy to now your biggest competitor stealing market share away from you, all while you just watched it happen and did nothing about it. That is just mind-blowing on how that can actually occur, but clearly we've seen over the last decade, things are different now for Intel. It's clear to me that management in the past has been incompetent with this company. They just kind of put it on cruise control. They never really put that money back into reinvestments and actually tried to grow the business and keep up with competitors. So there is hope that the new CEO is able to do that, but now I think Intel's going to be playing the catch-up game. They're not really going to be the leader in terms of innovation anymore, in my opinion. Apple, I think, is kind of taking the cake for that, and AMD is definitely a close second. And what it also kind of tells me indirectly is that a lot of talent has probably moved away from Intel and moved into companies like AMD and Apple, because those are companies that are actually pushing the envelope, kind of trying to go forward and further than we ever thought was possible. And because of that, Intel doesn't really have the top talent to keep up with that competition. So guys, really, while Intel looks great on paper, real world tells me otherwise, and I am staying away from this company right now because I think it could actually be the biggest value trap that a lot of YouTubers and value investors are falling for here, especially in this last year. I do hope the company is able to turn things around. I do hope that this stock outperforms and does well over the long term. And if that happens, I will definitely consider buying into the stock because the underlying business looks great. It's just that, the past and their history just doesn't really scream top-notch, top quality to me. But again, if they turn things around, I will consider buying in. I just want them to prove it to me before I'm able to dish out cash and put my hard-earned money into this company. So guys, I apologize if this video doesn't really fit your thesis on Intel. I know a lot of you are going to disagree with me. Let me know why. Give me your strongest bull case in the comments down below. Don't tell me valuation because we can both agree valuation looks great. Tell me why you believe Intel will be able to not only surpass AMD and Apple, but also become a company that's relevant once again, that growth investors even would want to buy in the future. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to invest positively, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.